A few days ago, it was reported that Quentin Tarantino had pitched an idea for a Star Trek movie to J.J. Abrams and to Paramount. Well, apparently this wasn't just some random pitch meeting. This idea might actually be moving forward. Earlier today, Deadline put out an article indicating that Quentin Tarantino has a writer in mind and already has some demands. This is what it had to say. Tarantino met for hours in a writer's room with Mark L. Smith, Lindsay Beer, and Drew Pearce. It continues and says, "I'm hearing the frontrunner is Smith, who wrote The Revenant." It ends with this: Tarantino has required it to be R-rated, and Paramount and Abrams have agreed to that condition. You can read the full article at the link down in the description. Now, before I give my full thoughts on all of this, tell me down below in the comments section, what do you think about Quentin Tarantino directing a Star Trek movie? What do you think about a Star Trek movie being rated R? And what do you think about these two pieces of information in light of Star Trek in general and what they're doing with Star Trek Discovery and taking it in a far more adult direction? I'd love to have a lively discussion about all of that. So I've got quite a few thoughts on this because there's quite a bit to dive into. When you've got a director like Quentin Tarantino and you say he might be directing a Star Trek movie and it might be rated R, that's all very, very, very interesting on many levels. And I'll start off by saying I enjoy all of the Quentin Tarantino movies I've seen, maybe not Kill Bill Part 2, but he's obviously a great director that has done some wonderful, wonderful films that I know I love. And I think about the idea of him doing a Star Trek movie on a level of just interesting ideas out there of the potential of what on earth would that be. I'm incredibly fascinated. The concept of what would a Star Trek movie directed by Quentin Tarantino look like is absolutely fascinating. The idea of that is, wow, what would he do with this property? And I mean, I think he's a brilliant storyteller that knows how to pay homage to different genres and incorporate many influences to tell stories that are both familiar while being totally new and all feeling like Quentin Tarantino products. He does that wonderfully. So it's fascinating. What would he do with Star Trek? That's piece number one. With all that said, I don't know that it's Star Trek if it's Quentin Tarantino. Star Trek, up until J.J. Abrams came around, had a flavor and a style in and of itself. And they went in different genres, and we're in a space station. We're off in a different quadrant, different centuries. But it had a flavor to it in and of itself that was a certain Roddenberry worldview. And they bent that at different times and tweaked it a little bit. But there was a certain progressive worldview of we've moved past certain pettiness to a hopeful view of the future where we're out trying to discover things. And J.J. Abrams took out of a lot of the discovery, let's seek out strange new worlds and new life forms. He took that out and kind of injected it with the energy that he gives into projects. And so that gave it its own flavor that had some of the hope, it had some of the fun, but it lost some of the cerebral side of things. And so that was kind of frustrating in a certain sense, but it was something I enjoyed for what it was. But it felt like we lost a little something in that. Star Trek Discovery came around, and it wasn't as fun as JJ Trek. It wasn't about discovery, even though it's called Discovery. It's like a wartime, so they're not really going out and discovering things, but they discovered a spore drive, and they're doing some things with that are kind of interesting. There's been some little hints that potentially there could be some going off to strange new worlds. But in general, it was a wartime show that wasn't about war, about a mutineer with a captain that had blown up his previous crew, and a bunch of things that just a bunch of odd things about it that it didn't have that flavor of Star Trek to it. Add to that foul language, F words in it that hadn't been in Star Trek before, and maybe I'm a bit prudish on those things, but I think there's a side to it to say that if you don't want your kids to hear certain words that hadn't been in Star Trek before, I don't know that we needed to add them to Star Trek. And then we had an episode in there where there's a sex scene with Klingons and you see Klingon boobs. And that we hadn't seen that in Star Trek before. There'd been some innuendo and some sexy type things sex scene type things in there, but not actual nudity of this nature. Certainly not of Klingons. And then there's a good bit of graphic violence in it. And so the reason I say this is that J.J. Trek had definitely lost the cerebral side of things, the idea of taking on social commentary stories to tell tales of allegory or allegory for present issues. That was gone from Star Trek, J.J. Trek. Discovery took away some of the hope. I mean, it's a real kind of bleak worldview. There's war breaking out, conflict, everyone's yelling at each other. There's bitty pettiness. Our captain's a liar. There's a bunch of things in it that just certainly don't have the hope that Star Trek's kind of known for. And certainly the progressed Federation that we've seen previously, to the level that people are like, well, maybe this is the mirror universe. Maybe this is a Sector 31, there's Section 31. Those types of things that people are speculating about because it feels so different. In light of that, they propose, what if Quentin Tarantino does an R-rated Star Trek movie? Which to me, my thought I just immediately go to, does this mean we're never getting normal Star Trek again? We're like classic Trek in the sense of that progressed Federation about Discovery. Does that mean that's gone? Does that mean the Star Trek I grew up with, that I love, it's dead? Now, certainly J.J. Trek would indicate that, Discovery would indicate that. It just seems like it's dead. We're not trying to do Star Trek as it meant before. We're doing something totally different and boldly going where no Star Trek has gone before, which is not doing Star Trek as Star Trek. And that bothers me a lot. If Discovery had the vibe of normal Trek, if it had given me more hope that it was going to have this idea of we're on adventures discovering things and a hopeful Roddenberry-esque Federation utopia, I'd be like, okay, I don't like that we're going so far off the rails with Star Trek, having Quentin Tarantino make an R-rated Star Trek, but at least I'm actually fascinated by it. I'm sure it'll make something good, and it's interesting to me. But then Discovery's not that. Discovery already has Tarantino graphic violence, already has F-word, already has nudity in it. And so we're going, Star Trek as I know it is just gone. And they don't seem to care. They really don't care. And there's a side that it's odd to me with them, people aren't bothered by that. I understand if you like Discovery and what they're doing, if you like J.J. Trek more so than old stuff, and you just love Quentin Tarantino, so you love all these ideas, I get that. But if you don't also go, yeah, I can see why a bunch of fans feel a little bit betrayed by this, I don't understand where you're coming from. Clearly, they're not trying to make Trek as it meant before. And to me, they're taking the central piece, because it's not just, yeah, Star Trek is, it's in outer space in the future. It's more than that. To me, there's a worldview to it that hasn't really been in J.J. Trek, hasn't been in Discovery. In an R-rated Quentin Tarantino Trek, doesn't sound like that worldview either. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm sure he would make a good movie. I'm sure it would be an interesting movie I'd be fascinated by. But I can't help but feel a certain sense of, all right, sounds like the nail is in the coffin of Trek as we knew it. It's gone. I kind of thought that with Discovery already, and it's just one more thing going, oh, it's gone. So that's my take on it. How about you? Tell me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Once again, just in general, your thoughts on Quentin Tarantino directing Star Trek, your thoughts on an R-rated Star Trek, and your thoughts on just in general sorts of ideas of the state of Star Trek after J.J. Trek, Discovery Trek, and now Tarantino Trek. Seems like Roddenberry Trek is just gone, and I don't even know what that means. What does Star Trek mean anymore at this point in time? If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies and TV with you. So join me in the comment section. I know you guys have big, strong opinions about Star Trek and the direction of it, what should and shouldn't be in there. We had a lively discussion before. I'm very game for a new one about Quentin Tarantino. And as always, thank you so much for watching.